Good evening. Thank you for joining us on Straight Talk. Our guest this evening is the Chairman of Consumer Council, Mr. Clement Chan. Mr. Chan has an accounting background and is currently the Managing Director of Assurance at BDO in Hong Kong. He was the President of the Hong Kong Institute of Certified Public Accountants in 2014 and was involved in accounting standards setting and governance activities. Tonight, we have asked him to share with us why protecting consumer rights is vital to ensuring Hong Kong is still a shopper's paradise. Welcome, Clement.
Thank you, Eugene.
Right, Clement, as you know, Hong Kong has been known as a shopper's paradise for decades, and whenever there is consumption disputes bound to arise, and while all these disputes are kind of unavoidable, how prevalent are actually shoppers' complaints that you've received at the Consumer Council?
It's very important to us, as you know, that for complaints, depending on the nature of the complaints, the number of the complaints on certain industries, it does give us some sort of insight on which are the prevailing consumer sort of behavior and the industries that need attention and improvement.
Right. So, how many complaints do you get? I mean, on average per year, do you get one that have more complaints and one that have fewer complaints?
Just to give you an example, in 2022, we did receive about over 30,000 complaints, which was about 43% jump on a year-on-year basis. So in the previous years, we did get around, over 20,000, 20-something thousand sort of complaints.
So would you say that the recent trend will be sort of on the upward scale, or it just happened to be just 2022?
I think it's fair to say that the nature of the complaints, the source of the complaints, the nature of the complaints do varies a bit. Although the number does jump a lot, but in fairness, the complaints about the actual consumption carried out in the market actually comes down a bit, but the total number increased because of the increased number of complaints on the online shopping.
Really?
Yeah.
So that means 2022 is a year that you see sort of a 43% jump, as you just said. And do you see this as a trend in the years to come, or you think it's just 1 year in 2022?
I do think that the online shopping complaints will be on the rising trend in the years to come.
Right. So what are the highest number of complaint cases? I'm sure you've got different categories. I mean, what are the most common complaints that you receive at the council?
The 2022 statistic gave us that clear picture. The one that is leading is the food and entertainment sector. Food and entertainment sector, particularly the portal, the food portal, the online food portal, actually is leading the list. Mm-hmm. As you could imagine, because of the COVID and pandemic that we just had, I think more and more people are ordering their food through the online food portal shops and things like that. So,
but I'm sure all of us, like our friends or relatives, they've been ordering food online, and I'm sure that trend will continue because it's quite convenient. So, do you have any complaint cases that you can share with us? Anything interesting in the food and entertainment?
Sure. I think the most common causes for complaint in the food delivery is about the non-delivery or the loss of the order. We had a case whereby the customer knows that portal very well, and he did order of food on one night, just like what he usually does. And he got the confirmation back from the shopper saying that the order has been taken. So he waited, and over half an hour, the food didn't come back, and he was wondering. So he checked on the apps again. It says that the order's been confirmed. So he waited for another hour, and then he called up the customer service. The customer service told him that the order was not there. So he said that he would like to cancel it, but that was, he thought that was the end of it. But the following day, in the morning, then his order did come through.
Really?
Yeah, and then he called up the customer service again. And then he found out that the order actually was initially taken as a pre-order for the following day. So that create, sort of a source of complaint. And sometimes I think, that tells you, even though you know the shops, you know the system well, you might have gone through the procedures for thousands of times, still because of computer, because of connectivity of the signal and things like that, sometimes it does create some unexpected, sort of error.
Right, so if something like that happens to you, what will you advise our viewers to do? I'm sure that can happen to anyone.
Yeah. I think our advice would be asking the customers to be vigilant, to be particularly paying attention to the terms and conditions, and what happens if you want to cancel the order or you want to request for the refund, what sorts of things that have been written on the website or on the initial sort of advertisement saying in what circumstances they could do whatever to cancel the order.
But surely you would say, let's put a case to the Consumer Council when that happens, right?
If they exhaust all those things and still cannot get the right results, they could come to us to see whether we can help them.
Right. So apart from food and entertainment, what other complaints you get that are quite common?
The next category from the second category is the electrical appliances.
Right.
And electrical appliances, again, it actually went up quite a bit. It's now close to 3,000, and that actually has increased by about 16% as compared with 2021. And I think we take it that because of the pandemic, people tend to stay at home more often, and because of their time at home, then they are using the electrical appliances more, and as a result, the wear and tear and the more sort of attention paid to the proper functioning of the electrical appliances lead to the increased number of complaints as well.
Well, hopefully those complaints aren't related to safety issues, because I remember recently in mid-level there was a flat that was in fire because of some overheating of a system. So how does the council ensure safety issues are addressed and make sure all the extra community are being protected?
There is a specific legislation called Consumer Goods Safety Ordinance. That is a very clear legislation regulating and asking all the merchants, all the traders who are selling electrical appliances in Hong Kong and to consumers need to ensure that all the goods that they are selling are compliant with the safety standard required by Hong Kong at large.
Yeah, just now when you mentioned two of the major complaints are due to COVID, that people having more online ordering of food and not using more electrical appliances. One thing that comes to my mind is actually with opening of the borders, like traveling resume, what we call revenge tourism, right? So do you get more complaints on that as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. Particularly at now, in recent times when the pandemic is really behind us and the border reopened, and we are seeing more and more number of travel-related complaints. To give you an example, like in 2022, when we were talking about the complaint cases in travel-related matters, it actually went up to around over 2,500 cases, which was about 43% increase from last year as well.
Yeah, so with all these complaints, I'm sure the council will want to help to do resolution. And sorry to ask, do you have any target rate of achieving to sort of sort out these issues?
We don't have a target rate as such, but we try to help in whatever circumstance, in whatever cases that was reported to us. We try to do our bit in helping the related party, the stakeholders, to come to some sort of compromise or resolution through our conciliation procedures.
Right. So what will be more preemptive consumer protection efforts that the council will do? Because what we said so far are what has happened. I'm sure you want to do some sort of education or prevention. I mean, what type of efforts will you try to do to minimize all these complaints?
In our view and our experience, I think it takes more to create a preemptive, a safety preemptive situation for consumers. And I think that there are three pillars involved. The first one is about the right legislative regimes. Like I said, in Hong Kong, we do have legislations in relation to consumer protection. But however, unlike some other jurisdictions, we do not have one single legislation protecting the consumer's rights. But we do have a few related to consumer related matters which has a combined effect of providing protection for consumers, such as trade description ordinance, such as consumer safety ordinance that I mentioned earlier.
Right, Chairman, let's take a break now, and viewers, we will be back very soon. Thank you for staying with us. We have been talking with Mr. Clement Chan, the Chairman of the Consumer Council, about the number and types of complaints that they receive and how the Council resolves these disputes. So, Chairman, in the first part, we had briefly touched on the different categories, and we do see a trend of increase. And I believe that's something that you'd like to clarify.
Yes, sorry about that. Just now when we were talking about the number of complaints that we received in 2022, I did give you the figure that it was over 30,000. It represents about 12% increase on a year-on-year basis rather than 43% that I alluded earlier by era.
Right, I'm sure the viewers will appreciate your clarification.
Thank you.
I think for most viewers, I think the Council, is quite well known to do in-depth reports and product tests and studies, and we do see the Consumer Council at monthly conferences, and also a very long-time magazine called The Choice. So you have recently released reports on something like food and like carcinogens or cooking oil, etc., etc. But some people will say that the Council is a toothless tiger, not because I'm in their profession, because you can't really make them change their way of practice. So how will you respond to that as a chairman?
Well, we are not, it's true that we are not a law enforcement agent in Hong Kong. But however, there are so many things in our toolbox that we can do to make sure that things are happening in the orderly manner. To give you a few examples, like we are always in close contact with law enforcement agents such as Customs, such as Hong Kong Police Force. If in the course of our work and our survey, if it comes to our attention that some of the merchants are practicing unscrupulous practices, such as they are selling things which are contravening the trade description ordinance, or some people are doing the things by deception, we can always report it to the law enforcement agent to ask them to take prompt action. And don't forget, we also have the ultimate last resort that we can always rely on, is that there's a very effective and powerful tool that we can use, such as name and shame. If we, sort of advertise or make it to public that what are the erroneous sort of action and the malpractices of certain merchants, they are definitely out of the market because of our action.
Right. Chairman, I do have an opportunity to go and visit some of your website, and I realize that you're not just protecting shoppers, but you also do advocacy work to protect our consumers in our daily life from various aspects like housing, commuting, dining, and everything, even to insurance and finance. So Can you tell us more about your advocacy work? I mean, it's definitely not an easy work because it encompasses such a wide range of topics, and each one will take time. And so how long do these studies take, and how would you best communicate to the community?
Indeed, you're absolutely right, Eugene. We cover not just the consumer expenses on entertainment, food, and things like that. We do cover, everything that is involved in the consumer life, such as housing, commuting, etc. Like you mentioned. And for advocacy, we actually, spend a lot of our resources in doing advocacy. If we identify some topic which is worth studying and dive deeper for the consumer interest, we will, put resources into preparing, a detailed study. Normally, such a detailed study would involve work, could be going to as long as 1 year. We typically spend a lot of resources in studying research, surveys. We carry out interviews, and we also, do a lot of observations and desktop studies, on related matters before we come to some sort of position on the subject matter. And for the last 10 years, we actually did over 20 such topics and advocacy studies.
Right, Chairman. I mean, as a community person, if you want to do something, you would go to your website and look at all your materials. But things are happening at very fast speed now. And how can we ensure the information that we receive are still valid?
Normally, when we do, decide on studying certain areas, certain space, we dive very deep, and normally, it covers the issues that are not just time specific. It's really, the hardcore matters relating to that issues. Just to give you an example, lately we had done a survey on property of outside of Hong Kong, because we just noted that there's a growing interest of Hong Kong people in buying properties outside of Hong Kong, which had been sold and displayed in the selling events in Hong Kong. And we believe that because of the growing interest, we do think that there's a lot of things that we should recommend or warn or remind the consumers to be aware of when they are buying properties outside of Hong Kong. So that is the kind of things that is really non-time specific.
Right, so there's a pool of material that's good for reference for the general community. Should they want to spend their money and they want to be vigilant, the council would be a very good resource place, isn't it?
Yes, right. Indeed.
Right, just now you mentioned about you do work with the enforcement agencies, so the customs and excise and also the Hong Kong police force. But those are actually reactionary work again. Will the council, or has the council been able to change any of the legislation? Because all your reports must be, put in a good deal of work, like even up to a year. It will be a wasteful effort if it doesn't really change things, because sometimes we do need laws to make sure things will happen in the right direction. What are your experience like? Does the government take your advice seriously? Have you seen actual implementation or new laws putting in?
I think it depends on a lot of other variables as well. Although, like I said, the topic that we chose normally carries a lot of impact on consumers at large, and that's why we picked them. But also, it depends on a lot of other things. Like, I'll give you an example. And other things that we looked at in the past was the cooling off period to do with certain industries. And it was such a relevant topic for a lot of consumers, particularly consuming or enjoying the services of those affected industries. But because of things like the COVID-19 pandemic, which might already create a very general sort of hardship for the merchants in the industries around that time. So when our report came out, at that time, during the COVID, the government might think, well, I'm sure the government would see the angle of the need of looking into those spaces, but because the timing might not be right, they are saying that they would try to look at these issues at a later time after the general sort of trading circumstances and phenomenon become better.
Right.
Yeah.
Chairman, recently you were in the news talking about this property management costs. I mean, why would you want to do a survey on property management fees? I mean, it's just suddenly come out, and I'm wondering, any rationale behind that?
The simple fact is over half of our population in Hong Kong are actually living in multi-story buildings. And when people living in multi-story buildings, they need to pay building management fees. Sometimes it's out of their control. And that's why, it affects a lot of people, and the magnitude is quite could be quite significant for a lot of households. Right. Therefore, we picked that topic to look at.
Well, the reason why I raised that up is all of us are being tuned in to say we have to pay management fees on time, or else your name will be posted on the notice board. But do you actually get complaints on those, and how many were they?
Oh, we do. Like in the last 11 years, we actually received over 600, close to 700 complaints about the quality of the management fee, the quality of the management service, or the misapplication of management fees, so on and so forth. And therefore, we do actually see and receive a lot of complaints about management fee.
Yeah, have you been able to resolve some of these complaints that you received?
We did resolve some of the complaints, but however, the experience that we have actually give us the impression that a lot of the lay owners, they might not be as well equipped as the developers or the management company in terms of the knowledge of the management fees, and this is quite a complex subject. Therefore, we think that it's definitely worthwhile for us to do more research on this and try to facilitate or try to whip up the due interest on this area, so as to hopefully see some sort of improvement coming in.
Right, Chairman, I'm afraid that's all the time we have, and thank you, Clement, for explaining to us how the Consumer Council continues to protect consumers' interests and empowers them in their purchases to get the best value for their money. This will definitely help Hong Kong maintain its reputation as a shopper's paradise. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in, and we will see you next time.